Subject: Shiphead Eulina species, Urikari ship, RSV Loalana. Location: redacted. Regara firing. Gruna side-eyed. Maybe we'll actually get the kill this time, Crane said with an optimistic tone. Target destroyed by the Mac round of a U.S. destroyer. I will get them next time, I interjected. I didn't believe a single word that came out of my mouth. In a way, our situation was kind of funny. I had been worried that fighting to get us involved in the battle would get us all killed, yet we were the safest and most bored that we'd ever been. Even listening to diplomats prattle on aboard the USS Thanthan would be more exciting than this. Shiphead, with all due respect, I feel like we're way out of our league here, Crone said. Well, yeah. It took us a few decades to build up to the point where we could push the OU back a bit. Knowing what we know now, our successes were pretty much just luck. Kryn laughed. If all the ships that the U had in the Milky Way came at us at once, we'd have been lucky to keep it at a stalemate. This, however, is a battle to end that war. We were never meant to be here. The United Systems just dragged us along for the ride. A murmur of disgruntled agreement washed over the bridge. Even I couldn't argue with her assessment. It would certainly be fair to say that the U.S. had not been entirely prepared for this conflict when we dragged it to their space, but you wouldn't know it now. The speed at which they had adapted was absolutely terrifying. Even with all of my experiences with the humans, Alamari, Nuknu, and Gaunt, I had been under the delusion that our presence here would make a difference. I had argued with my father, claiming that the U.S. needed all the help they could get. But even after a week of combat, we hadn't managed to secure a single kill. Instead, we were maintaining a symbolic position within the fleet, unable to fight or be fought due to the deadliness of the ships around us. Shiphead, may I get us a little further away from the pack? Crone asked. And there it was, the question that I had been dreading. I had expected it days earlier, so I'd had the chance to practice my reply. Is our ego so bruised that we must actively risk our lives unnecessarily just to soothe it? I replied. The silence that fell aboard the bridge was my answer. There's no arguing that it's stupid, but each and every one of us were warriors at heart, and we needed to do something. I took a deep breath and released it in a sigh. So be it. Let us hunt then. There were a few quiet, celebratory sounds from the crew as Crone began to break formation. I expected to receive some form of reprimand from the United Systems forces, but none came. Instead, I watched some of the ships make way for us on the TAC map. It brought a small smile to my face when I realized that they understood. I've located a good target, Crane said. They're banged up but still capable of putting up a fight. Must have taken a glancing blow, I replied, or taken a round that traveled through another ship or two. Getting us into position, Crone reported. She worked on her terminal and the TAC map highlighted the position of our target. It also showed U.S. ships disappearing and reappearing, using their FTLDs to make small jumps to avoid incoming fire and get better firing positions, a tactic which I desperately wished we could imitate. That's not to say that the United Systems hadn't been extremely kind to the RSV Loalana. Our ship had received every upgrade that the treaty between the U.S. and the Republic would allow, so much so that it's entirely possible that the Loalana had been made into the most advanced Republic space vessel to ever exist. Even so, our technology was still several generations behind even the most outdated U.S. ship. The TAC map that had been installed on our bridge was perfectly capable of displaying tracked projectiles, yet our sensors were only capable of picking up projectiles of certain mass, only displaying smaller ones when they were far too close for comfort. This issue came to my attention as the ship we were hunting began to fire at us. Evasive maneuvers, I ordered. Crone fired our deck thrusters and barely managed to move us out of the way of the U-ship's initial volley. The Mac rounds ripped past us at speeds which would have surely disabled our shields. Then came the missiles, but those were much less of a threat. Point defense lasers firing, Gruner reported. They're holding up pretty nicely for being a patch job, Luna added. I was worried that the U.S. engineers had rushed things. Guess they really do just work faster than us. The U's missiles exploded before they reached us, causing a brief period of interference with our sensors, another issue that I was certain the U.S. didn't have to deal with. Any chance of getting under the enemy? I asked. No, shiphead, Crone replied. It's tracking us well. I suppose we'll have to track it right back. I want a firing solution. Yes, sir. I watched the lights for our port and boil thrusters turn, green indicating those thrusters were ignited. Our Mac soon aligned with the U vessel, and we began to close while dodging incoming fire. The enemy ship was attempting to move away, but its bow thrusters must have been damaged by its earlier contact with the U.S. It would have to turn around to run away. A smile formed on my face for the first time since the battle began, and I thanked whichever sun was watching over us. We had them. I patiently counted down until we were within range of a Mac firing solution. Fire! I ordered. Firing, Gruner replied giddily. Several pieces of ordnance rapidly departed our ship and began to make their way through the void to their destination. Our Mac disabled their shields, our guns overwhelmed their PDLs, and our missiles ripped open their hull. A cheer rang out through the ship, but it quickly died out. A hull breach doesn't defeat an OU ship. Target their reactor, I ordered. Already on it, sir, Kryn replied. Recharging Mac, Gruna added. They shouldn't be able to fight back, Luna said. That salvo had to have damaged their Mac. Maintain evasive maneuvers, I chuckled, just in case. Crone shifted from port to starboard thrusters to throw off any attempts at a firing solution from the enemy. Luna let out a low whistle as another Mac round went sailing past us, but I was busy watching our own Mac's charge indicator. Once it filled, I verified our firing solution. Fire. The round from our Mac flew straight and true, and a moment later the enemy vessel disappeared from the TAC map. Another, more raucous cheer spread throughout the ship. It was only a single kill, but it granted us a reason for traveling across the universe to somewhere we had no business being. Even I let out a celebratory exclamation as I checked the TAC map for any additional nearby targets. My victory shout died in my throat. An OU battleship had seen our fight and was heading our direction at full burn. It was shedding speed, which was an indication that it was actively seeking a firing solution, and we were the only ship that it could possibly be firing at. Shiphead, Crane said, panic seeping into her voice. I see it, I replied. What do we do? Gruna asked. Maintain evasive and try to get us out of here, Crone. Yes, shiphead. Aside from turning tail, the only thing we could do was ask for help. It would undermine our accomplishment, but that's far better than losing our lives in a fight that we never had a chance of winning. I reached for the comms, console, and paused when it sounded an incoming fleet comm hail. All units stand down, a familiar raspy voice said over the comm. Everyone froze at Omega's unexpected order. I glanced at the TAC map and noticed that the battleship had come to a stop. There weren't any projectiles being exchanged between the other ships either. Congratulations, shiphead Yulina, Omega said. The crew of the RSV Loalana secured the last kill of this conflict, in space at least. What do you mean? I asked. I have secured control of the Omni Union's forces and the Marines have secured their leadership. The Grand Vessel is ours. The war is over. We've won. We've won, I repeated, stunned. After all this time, after so many lives, we've won. Just like that? Not the phrasing that I would use. Even if things were relatively calm out here, there were some rather intense battles aboard the Grand Vessel. Right, I'm sorry. I'm sure that many of your soldiers lost their lives in those battles. Definitely more than I'd have liked, Omega replied. However, we lost far fewer than we believed that we would. I see. I trailed off, building the nerve to ask the only other question on my mind. So, did you find out why the U was doing all of this? Crane casually asked. The suddenness of the question caught me off guard, and I stared at my intel head with my mouth agape until Omega began to speak. We did. Turns out it was religion gone awry in the worst way possible. The AI said in a bitter voice. The founder of the Omni Union was a long-dead eunuch known as the Omnifier. He was a slave owned by a master of science and discovered entropy during his service. However, he misunderstood that discovery and believed that a semi-deific being that he called Urizathron was stealing energy from our universe. The scientific minds of the time seemed to understand that entropy is simply a matter of equilibrium, and dismissed this eunuch's findings. A slave rebellion was likely already brewing, but the Omnifier's impassioned claims of an extra-universal devourer lit a spark that led to him leading that rebellion. Must have succeeded, I said. Indeed. The Omnifier overthrew that government and began a religion, the Omni-Union, dedicated to defeating Euryzothron. That was the purpose of the grand vessel. We actually got quite lucky because once the hull was complete, it would have been armed to the teeth. We wouldn't have stood a chance against it. What do you think they would have done once they figured out that Euryzothron was a myth? Crane asked. There were definitely those who realized that already. Those that spoke up were executed for heresy and dissidence, of course. However, I found it particularly interesting that if the Omni-Union was unable to defeat Euryzothron, which would have definitely been the case due to its non-existence, the Grand Vessel would instead serve as an extra-universal habitat. It indicates a possibility that someone with power within the OU knew that the Omnifier was wrong. But to answer your question, given the political similarities to historical governing entities, it is likely that they would eventually have attempted to conquer the universe. I see, I sighed. So what now? Now we get you home. The United Systems will maintain control of the Grand Vessel and will lead efforts to rehome its denizens. All by yourselves? No, but it's unclear as to how we're going to accept help at the moment. There are many who are wary of the Republic and don't want you catching up to us technologically. Personally, I don't think it will make much difference. Even if Republic ship technology caught up to the U.S., there are still several technological and tactical advantages that the U.S. will maintain. You being one of them, of course. Indeed. Back on the subject of getting you home, your status as a diplomat has been restored, so you will likely be forced to attend several victory parties. Looking forward to it, I replied sarcastically. I thought you might. Omega chuckled. I have other matters to attend to now. We will meet again, shiphead Yulina. I nodded absent-mindedly as the comm disconnected. My mind reeled from the variety of feelings I felt regarding our victory. The war itself began over one of the stupidest reasons I'd ever heard, with the exception of a certain dropped hat. If enough people had been willing to speak reason and enough people had been willing to listen, countless tragedies could have been avoided, and even though it was over now, we still had plenty of cleanup to do. But we survived, and we ended the threat to our galaxy and all of the other galaxies that the Omni-Union threatened. That, at least, was something to be glad for. Let's go home, I said with a heartfelt smile.